"Dad, you're not invited this year." That's how my daughter ended 40 years of Thanksgiving tradition standing beneath a crystal chandelier in her $2.4 million Scottsdale mansion. One hand wrapped around a flute of champagne, the other scrolling through her phone like she couldn't wait to post a victory. She said it like she was canceling a dinner reservation, not exiling the man who paid for the marble under her heels. She expected anger. She got silence. "My name is Adam Whitaker, 73 years old. For 4 decades, I worked as a structural engineer, the man who built bridges across Arizona's dry canyons and highways. I'm a widower, a man who still irons his own shirts, balances his checkbook, and believes that gratitude is the foundation every good structure needs. But that evening, standing in my daughter's house, I realized the foundation of my family had quietly cracked. I looked at her, at the pearls around her neck, the ones I'd bought for her college graduation, and tried to understand when style had become more valuable than substance. "Why not?" I asked, voice steady. "My in-laws are flying in from Los Angeles." Dinah said, her eyes sliding away. "Eli thinks it's better to keep things simple this year. You know how they are about appearances. Appearances, that word again." Eli entered from the patio, sunglasses still on, though the sun had set. "Adam, it's not personal. My parents just like a certain atmosphere. It's a business dinner too, investors, clients. We don't want to make anyone uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable," I repeated, tasting the word like rust on a pipe. "Because I'm..." "What exactly, retired ordinary?" He smiled, polished hollow. "You've done well for yourself, but this is a different circle." I nodded slowly. 40 years designing bridges had taught me how to recognize structural weakness before the collapse. And right now, the bridge between father and daughter was buckling. "Dana," I said quietly, "do you agree with this?" She hesitated. For a second, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to sit on my shoulders at the county fair before guilt washed over her features. Then she nodded. "I think it's for the best, Dad." Silence filled the room. Even the refrigerator hum seemed ashamed to break it. I set my coffee cup down carefully, the sound sharp against the marble countertop. "Enjoy your Thanksgiving," I said. Eli stepped forward, all false charm. Don't take it the wrong way, but I was already walking out. My footsteps echoed on the imported stone I'd paid for. Each step counted years of sacrifice, tuition checks, down payments, late-night rescues when their bills piled up. At the doorway, Dana's voice trembled. "Dad, please don't be upset. Maybe we can do something next weekend, just us." I turned back once. The golden light of that mansion glowed around her, perfect and hollow. "Goodbye, Dana." Outside, desert air cut sharp against my face. My old Cadillac sat between 2 Range Rovers that probably cost more than my entire retirement fund. I started the engine, and the headlights carved a line through the palm-lined street. In the rearview mirror, her house looked like a postcard, flawless, expensive, and completely soulless. 5 years, 60 months, $90,000. That's how much I'd paid to make sure my daughter could host dinners I wasn't welcome at. By the time I hit the highway to Sedona, I wasn't angry anymore. Just clear. Betrayal, I'd learned, isn't loud. It's quiet. It looks like politeness and sounds like justification. I whispered to the empty car, "You taught me the value of peace, Dana, and the cost of silence." The desert sky stretched wide and merciless, and somewhere between the highway lines and the wind, I let the last bit of pride slip away not in defeat, but in preparation. Because men like me don't break, we calculate. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching, from your city, your state, or the little town you call home. I'd love to know who's listening tonight. The next morning, the house was silent, except for the sound of the coffee maker. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe you, it judges you. I sat at my kitchen table in Sedona sunlight spilling across the red sandstone outside. My wife used to love mornings like this. Coffee, radio, news, the smell of toast. But since she passed, mornings had become math problems, what to keep, what to let go, what still mattered. Last night I realized what didn't. I reached for the leather binder that held my records. Engineers keep everything: measurements, plans, receipts, proof. I flipped through 5 years of bank statements until I found the familiar transaction, $1,500 automatic transfer, Sutton household mortgage. 60 payments, $90,000. Each line looked clean and professional, but all I could see were the times I'd said yes when I should have said enough. I had convinced myself it was love, that helping my daughter wasn't enabling her husband's arrogance. I'd called it generosity. In truth, it was guilt, a habit of fixing things that weren't mine to repair. I opened my laptop. The screen lit up with my bank's logo. One click and the list of automated transfers appeared. Eli's name glowed at the top, scheduled for tomorrow, as faithful as sunrise. I hovered the cursor over Manage Payments. My hands didn't tremble. They'd done that enough when I buried my wife, when I retired, when I signed my first Social Security form. Not today. Today they were steady. $500 a month barely covers our property taxes. Eli's voice replayed in my head, smug and careless. Barely covers. I clicked Cancel Payment. A small window popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel this automatic transfer? I pressed. Confirm. The words appeared like a revelation: payment schedule successfully canceled. Something loosened in my chest. It wasn't revenge, it was arithmetic. I'd corrected the equation. I leaned back and stared at the quiet kitchen around me. The walls were old plaster, not marble. My refrigerator hummed like a loyal dog, not a status symbol. Everything here had been earned, not financed. I made breakfast: 2 scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee. Simple, honest food. The kind that doesn't need approval. While I ate, I took notes on a pad beside me, writing what I'd learned the hard way. Help is a gift, not an obligation. Gratitude is not a transaction. Silence is not forgiveness. The list looked short, but it felt like a lifetime of lessons compressed into 3 lines. After breakfast, I walked outside. The Sedona air was crisp, full of cedar and distant dust. Across the horizon, the red rocks glowed like embers against the sky. For the first time in years, I felt like the world wasn't leaning on me, it was standing with me. Back inside, I sat at my late wife's old writing desk. The framed photo of her still leaned slightly to the left, the way she'd always left it. She had the kind of smile that made people believe in fairness. I opened the drawer and took out her worn Bible, the one with the cracked spine, and her handwriting along the margins. She'd underlined a verse years ago, one I'd forgotten until now. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. I traced the faded ink with my thumb. Freedom, I realized, isn't loud. It's not fireworks or applause. It's the quiet click of a canceled payment, the sound of reclaiming your dignity. That evening, I poured a single glass of bourbon, toasted her photo, and whispered, "You'd have been proud of me today." The air outside carried the faint scent of rain rare for the desert. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled low like approval. Tomorrow Eli would wake up and realize the river had stopped flowing. And when people like him can't drink from someone else's well, they finally learn what thirst feels like. The truth shall make you free. My wife believed it, and now I did too. By the next morning, I'd almost forgotten about the cancellation. Almost. I was halfway through the crossword 7 letters meaning peace when my phone buzzed across the kitchen counter. Eli Sutton. I stared at the name for a second. I could have ignored it. But something in me wanted to hear the sound of his confidence one last time. "Morning, Eli." "Adam, thank God," he said, his voice brisk and rehearsed. "I need a quick favor." There it was again. Need, not ask. My parents' flight lands at 3:15 today, Phoenix Sky Harbor Terminal B. I'm stuck in meetings all afternoon and Dana's busy with caterers. Could you pick them up? Not even a pause for my answer. Just assumption. The same tone he'd used when he needed a check for the property tax, a bridge loan for a remodel, or a quick cash injection for a business idea that went nowhere. "Eli," I said evenly, "what makes you think I'm available?" He laughed, a slick, practiced sound. "Come on, Adam. What else do you have going on? You're retired. It's not like your schedule's packed." The insult was smooth, almost elegant. "You make a good point," I replied. "What time did you say? 3:15 United 462 from LAX. They'll be expecting someone with a sign that says Richard and Patricia Sutton. Just drive them straight here. We've got a chef waiting. The least you can do is be punctual." I took a pen and scribbled notes in the margin of my crossword. Flight 462. 3:15. Terminal B. Eli's tone softened as if to seal the deal. "I told Dana you're reliable, Adam. You might get emotional sometimes, but when it comes to actual tasks, you're dependable. That's what I like about you." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Reliable. Of course. That's right. I knew you'd understand. "Thanks again, old man. You're saving us a headache." He hung up without waiting for confirmation. At 3:15 that afternoon, the Suttons arrived at Phoenix Sky Harbor. Their silver hair and matching luggage would have stood out anywhere two people used to being served, not waiting. But they did wait. At 3:45, Richard probably began pacing near baggage claim. At 4:10, Patricia likely called Eli, her voice sharp and accusing. By 4:30, I imagine they'd both started wondering if something had happened to their driver. Meanwhile, I sat in my Sedona living room, feet propped on the coffee table, sunlight painting the walls gold. My half-finished crossword lay open beside a mug of cooling tea. 7 letters for peace. I filled it in, serenity. The irony made me chuckle. My phone started buzzing on the counter. Once, twice, 10 times. I let it ring. At 4:50, voicemail number 1 arrived. Eli's voice clipped and irritated. "Adam, where are you? My parents have been waiting for over an hour. Call me back immediately." At 5:20, voicemail number 3, panic edging his tone. "This is ridiculous. They're standing with their luggage. They said you promised." At 5:45, voicemail number 6, rage replacing polish. "You've humiliated my parents. Do you understand how this makes us look?" I did understand. Perfectly. Each voicemail was a payment coming due not in dollars, but in humility. By 6:00 p.m., the Sedona light had turned amber. I poured myself a glass of iced tea, walked onto the porch, and watched the horizon burn orange over the red cliffs. Somewhere a hawk circled above the canyon, free and unbothered. I listened to one last voicemail before turning off my phone. It was Dana's voice, soft, anxious. "Dad, Eli says you forgot. Please, if you can just go now. They're tired. They're old. Old." Funny, I thought. That was the word they'd used about me when they didn't want me at Thanksgiving. I closed my eyes, breathed in the desert air, and whispered to myself, "Let them feel what exclusion tastes like." It wasn't spite, it was balance. The world had tilted one way for too long. I was just resetting the scale. When the sun slipped behind the cliffs, I went back inside, sat in my recliner, and picked up the crossword again. 6 letters, revenge. I penciled in avenge and smiled. Outside, the last light faded. Inside, my peace began. The next morning, my phone started buzzing before sunrise. Not the usual slow trickle of spam calls, but a rapid succession of notifications, texts, emails, and missed calls piling up like warning lights on a dashboard. When I finally checked, I saw the first one. "Have you seen Facebook?" I hadn't, but I would. On my laptop screen, the headline glared like a courtroom accusation. "Elderly couple stranded at airport for 5 hours by heartless man named Adam Whitaker." Below it was a blurry photo, mine probably taken through Dana's living room window that night I'd left. My face frozen mid-sentence, framed in that same golden light that now looked sinister. Richard Sutton had written the post. His words dripped with righteous indignation. "My wife and I, both in our 70s, were abandoned at Phoenix Sky Harbor yesterday by a man who had promised to pick us up. We waited over 5 hours, with heavy luggage, no call, no explanation. What kind of person does that? What if this was your parents, your grandparents? Share this to raise awareness. People like this should be known." Below that, 43 comments. Disgusting behavior. Monsters don't always look scary. I know him, he lives near Sedona. Always thought he was odd. Shared. Every line was a nail. They didn't mention the years I paid their mortgage. They didn't mention the dinners, the repairs, the checks written without question. Just one carefully edited truth designed to destroy everything else. The post had already been shared 58 times by the time I finished reading. People from Dana's neighborhood, from Eli's business circle, even a few names I recognized from my church community. That one stung. I closed the laptop and sat back, listening to the ticking of the wall clock. It wasn't the kind of anger that explodes. It was the kind that hardens like cooling steel. They hadn't just humiliated me privately. They'd turned it into a spectacle, and in their arrogance they'd made a mistake only the powerful make, assuming their version of the story was the only one that mattered. I stood up, stretched my back, and walked to my small office. The smell of cedar and old paper filled the air. I opened the drawer where I kept my financial records, my notebooks, my late wife's stationery. Precision had always been my armor. If they wanted a public war, they were about to learn what happens when a man who built bridges decides to burn one down perfectly, structurally, irreversibly. That afternoon, I drove into town to meet a man named Mark Dalton, a retired police detective turned private investigator. My insurance agent had once mentioned him, said he was discreet, efficient, and allergic to dishonesty. Dalton listened quietly as I explained what had happened. No pity, no surprise, just quiet calculation. Family, financial exploitation, he said, adjusting his glasses. Common story. People think age equals weakness, "What do you want from me, Mr. Whitaker?" "The truth," I said. "Find out what I've really been paying for these last 5 years." He nodded once. 2 weeks, 1,500 up front. I wrote the check without hesitation. It was the best investment I'd made in years. That night I sat on the porch, a blanket over my legs, the desert stretching dark and endless ahead. My phone still buzzed occasionally, notifications from strangers condemning me for sins I hadn't committed. I ignored them all. The sky above Sedona was filled with stars, billions of them, ancient and indifferent. I looked up and whispered, "Lord, let me see clearly before I act rashly." The wind answered with a low sigh through the junipers. Inside, the Bible still lay open on the desk where I'd left it days ago. The same verse stared back at me. "The truth shall make you free." I smiled faintly. "Yes," I said aloud, "but first it'll make them nervous." The anger didn't fade, but it sharpened into something useful focus. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was building. And this time I was building something designed to last. "Lord, give me clarity, not anger," I prayed. "And let truth do what wrath never could." If you're still following this story, type 1 in the comments, just so I know you're here with me, listening as it unfolds. 2 weeks passed before Mark Dalton called. His voice was calm, but there was a quiet energy beneath it. The sound a man makes when he's holding dynamite and knows exactly how long the fuse is. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, "I think you'll want to sit down for this." I already was. He slid a thick manila folder across the diner table when we met. The pages inside looked harmless, spreadsheets, statements, photocopies, but to a man like me, they might as well have been confessionals. "Start with your son-in-law," he said. "Eli Sutton." The first page showed casino records, 3 loyalty cards each under slight variations of his name. Gold tier status at 2. Over $60,000 in gambling debt. The second page, cash advances on credit cards, multiple payday loans, and a car title loan on that silver Mercedes he loved to polish every Saturday morning. "He's been juggling debt like a circus act," Dalton said. "Losing more than he wins. Classic pattern. The mortgage payments you've been making. They didn't just cover the house, they covered his habits." I felt something twist in my stomach. Not surprise exactly, confirmation. The kind that doesn't hurt so much as it hardens you. I turned to the next section labeled Richard Sutton, CR. Dalton leaned back, arms crossed. "Now this one's more complicated. Offshore accounts. Cayman Islands, Switzerland. The kind of money that gets hidden, not spent. Bank statements, tax filings, donation receipts all lined up like dominoes. The total $2.7 million in undeclared income. Fake charitable contributions. A maze of shell companies. He's been cooking his books for years," Dalton said, "and using the same connections he bragged about to keep the IRS off his back. But if someone were to provide detailed evidence..." He didn't need to finish. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. So this was the world my daughter had chosen: gold-plated corruption built on borrowed money and buried sins. "Why tell me all this?" I asked finally. Dalton smiled slightly. "Because you paid for their illusion, Mr. Whitaker. And I figured you'd want to know what your investment bought." He wasn't wrong. I paid the remaining balance, thanked him, and drove home through the desert dusk. The sun was melting behind the red cliffs, turning everything the color of old blood. When I reached my driveway, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car folder on the passenger seat and let the engine tick as it cooled. For 5 years, I'd been the quiet benefactor, the dependable old man who wrote checks and asked no questions. They called me weak because I gave freely. But giving doesn't make you weak. Blindness does. And I was done being blind. That night, I spread the documents across my dining table. I organized them by date, by transaction, by hypocrisy. Engineer habits die hard. Each page told the same story, greed disguised as success. Every loan, every offshore transfer, every fabricated smile at those family dinners. I poured myself a small bourbon, the way my wife used to pour wine when she was solving crosswords beside me. Her photo sat on the shelf near the window, smiling softly beneath the frame's dust. "Looks like we built the wrong bridge, love," I murmured. "But I can still decide where it collapses." The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. The first to Dana. I kept my tone warm. "Sweetheart, I'd like to host a Christmas dinner. Just family. It's time we put this behind us." Her voice brightened instantly, a mix of hope and guilt. "Really, Dad? After everything?" "Christmas is about family," I said, "and forgiveness." The second call to Eli. He was wary, cautious. "What's this about peace?" I said. "We could all use some." The third to Richard Sutton himself. His voice carried that smugness only men with lawyers and private jets possess. "Well, Mr. Whitaker," he said, "I didn't expect to hear from you. I trust you've come to your senses." I smiled to myself. "You could say that." He laughed, assuming he'd won. "Good. Then we'll see you Christmas Eve. Dana will send the details." When I hung up, the quiet returned to my house. Outside, Sedona was wrapped in the chill of December, the sky silver with low clouds. I walked to the mantel and set 3 small wrapped boxes there, the kind that looked festive enough to blend with the season. Each would hold a single name: Dana, Eli, Richard. 3 gifts, 3 truths, 3 lessons, and 1 final act of engineering, the demolition of a false foundation. If you're still here listening, type 1 in the comments. I want to know who's walking beside me as this story unfolds. Christmas Eve arrived sharp and cold, the kind of desert night that made even the stars feel brittle. Dana's mansion glittered like a snow globe come to life. White lights wrapped around the palms, gold ribbons framing the entrance, carol music floating through the open doors. I parked my old Cadillac in the shadow of a $500,000 Range Rover and carried 3 gift boxes, each tied with a red ribbon. The warmth of the house hit me as soon as I stepped inside Cinnamon Wine, and the faint tension that always precedes confession. Dad Dana hurried toward me, cheeks flushed, her smile fragile but sincere. "You came. I told you I would," I said, kissing her cheek. "Christmas is about family, isn't it?" Behind her, Eli appeared in a perfectly tailored navy suit, his charm turned up to 10. "Adam, glad you could make it. Let's put the past behind us." He said it like forgiveness was a switch he controlled. "Absolutely," I replied. "That's exactly what I'm here for." At the dining table, 12 places were set, crystal glasses, silverware gleaming like surgical instruments. Richard and Patricia Sutton sat at the head, exuding wealth and judgment in equal measure. Mr. Whitaker Richard said, nodding with the confidence of a man who believes in his own invincibility. "Good to see you." I trust we've moved on from that unfortunate airport misunderstanding. I smiled. Completely. The meal began prime rib lobster bisque, all served by hired caterers. Small talk filled the air, real estate stocks, charitable foundations. Every word felt like insulation against truth. When dessert plates were cleared, I stood. "If you don't mind," I said, "I brought a few gifts." Dana's eyes lit up, half relieved. "Dad, you didn't have to." "Oh, I did," I said softly. "It's time I gave back what was owed." I placed the first box in front of her. "For you, sweetheart." She tore the paper carefully, smiling at first, until she saw the manila folder inside. The smile froze. Inside were casino statements, loan documents, credit card slips. Her hands trembled. "Dad, what is this?" "The truth," I said gently. "About where your husband's been spending the money I sent every month." Eli snapped, color draining from his face. "This is wildly inappropriate, is it?" I asked. "Because those are your signatures on the betting slips, and those I pointed to the second page are the pawn receipts for your car title." Dana looked at him, eyes wide, mouth trembling. "You told me the accounts were business investments." "They were sort of," Eli muttered. "Business investments don't come with blackjack tables," I said quietly. She shoved the folder toward him, the papers spilling across the table like confetti from a ruined celebration. The silence that followed was so heavy you could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the next room. "Now for you, Richard." I placed the second box in front of the patriarch. He opened it slowly, suspicion replacing arrogance. Inside were foreign bank statements, tax returns, and copies of charitable donations that never reached their supposed destinations. Richard's jaw tightened. "You have no idea what you're meddling with, old man." "Oh, I do," I said. "Cayman Islands account ending in 4627, 2.7 million undeclared. You built your empire on deception, Richard." I just pulled back the curtain. Patricia covered her mouth, whispering something I couldn't hear. Eli tried to recover his tone. This is private family business." "Exactly," I said. "And I'm the only one here acting like family." Donna's voice broke. "Dad, how did you get all this?" "I hired someone honest," I said. "That's rarer than you think these days." For a moment, no one spoke. Christmas lights blinked along the tree, flickering like warning signals. Then came the sound of tires on gravel outside. A doorbell. Eli frowned. "Who's that?" "I invited a couple more guests," I said. When Dana opened the door, two figures stepped in, dark coats, badges flashing under the chandelier. "Mr. and Mrs. Sutton," the woman said evenly. "I'm Agent Rodriguez, Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. This is Agent Fisher. We'd like to discuss some discrepancies in your tax filings." Richard shot to his feet. "This is outrageous." Agent Rodriguez laid a sealed envelope on the table. "You'll find the summons and supporting documentation inside. We expect your cooperation within 72 hours. Donna sank back into her chair, pale as snow. Eli turned to me, voice shaking. "You called the IRS. I sipped my wine." "No, Eli. I sent them the truth." "They called themselves," Richard sputtered. "You vindictive old fool, you've destroyed." "I didn't destroy anything," I interrupted quietly. "You did that the moment you built your lives on lies." For a long time, no one moved. Outside, carolers sang faintly down the street. Inside, truth had finally spoken louder than money. I picked up my coat, looked at Dana one last time and said, "I told you Christmas was about family. Now you know what kind of family you married into." Then I walked out into the cold December air, each breath sharp and clean. Above me, the desert stars looked clearer than they had in years. I whispered, "To the night Lord Justice came tonight, not through rage, but through truth. And that's always been your kind of victory." 3 days passed before the real storm arrived. Sedona mornings are usually silent, the kind of quiet that lets you hear the wind moving between red rocks like a hymn. But that Tuesday, the quiet broke with the sound of tires grinding over gravel. Then came the pounding on my front door. I didn't rush. I finished stirring sugar into my coffee, set the spoon down, and took one slow breath. When I opened the door, 3 faces glared back at me. Richard and Patricia Sutton, looking nothing like the regal couple from Christmas Eve, and Eli standing behind them, tie-loosened eyes burning with sleepless fury. "Well," I said, keeping my tone pleasant, "this is a surprise." Richard's voice cracked with indignation. "You ruined us." Patricia's lipstick was smudged, her hands trembling. "We were humiliated in front of our friends, in front of our community. Do you have any idea?" "I do," I said evenly. 5 hours at the airport, wasn't it? You should be experts in humiliation by now. Eli pushed forward, jaw tight. "You went too far, Adam. You didn't just embarrass us, you destroyed lives. You called the IRS, I didn't call anyone, I said. I simply told the truth to people who care about numbers as much as I do." Richard's face flushed red. "My company is under federal investigation. My accounts are frozen. I could face prison. That's between you and your accountant." I replied, stepping aside. "Would you like to come in?" They hesitated, then filed inside like a defeated army. Patricia dropped onto the sofa, shoulders shaking. Eli paced the room, hands in his hair. Richard stood near the window, glaring at me like he could will me back into submission. "You think this is justice," he said. "You think humiliating an old man in front of his family makes you righteous." "An old man," I smiled thinly. "Funny that's what you called me when you excluded me from Thanksgiving. Seems age only matters when it's convenient." Eli slammed his fist against the mantel. "You've made a powerful enemy." I looked at him, calm as still water. "No, Eli. I made powerful men accountable. There's a difference." For a moment no one spoke. The clock on the wall ticked toward noon, steady and indifferent. Dana appeared in the doorway, then unannounced, pale, uncertain. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of truth had shrunk her world. "Dad?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Dana," I said gently. "You shouldn't be here." "I needed to be. I needed them to see what they've done." Eli turned to her, desperate. "Dana, you don't believe him, do you? He's twisted everything, he's vindictive." She cut him off, voice trembling but steady. "I saw the documents, Eli. I saw the letters from the IRS. It's all real." He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Patricia covered her face with both hands, sobbing quietly. Richard just stared out the window at the driveway, his reflection fractured by the glass. That's when the next knock came, sharp, professional, unhurried. I didn't have to ask who it was. 2 federal cars idled at the curb, their lights flashing faintly in the midday sun. The same 2 agents from Christmas Eve stepped out now in business suits instead of coats. Agent Rodriguez nodded politely when I opened the door. "Mr. Sutton," she called out, "we need to speak with you and your wife." Patricia gasped, clutching her handbag like it might save her. Richard tried to regain his authority, voice rising with hollow confidence. "You can't just show up unannounced. Agent Fisher held out a folder. Federal warrant for seizure of assets related to unreported offshore income. You'll need to come with us. Eli's mouth fell open. This can't be happening. Agent Rodriguez turned to me briefly. Mr. Whitaker, thank you again for your cooperation. The evidence you provided was instrumental. I nodded once. Engineers believe in clean design, I said. I just wanted to make sure justice was structurally sound. Richard lunged forward, finger trembling. You think this is over? You'll regret this, Whitaker. I met his gaze without flinching. I already did regret it for 5 years. That was long enough. The agents led them out, their protests fading into the desert wind. The door closed softly behind them, leaving the air still and heavy with the scent of truth. Dana stood frozen near the kitchen. Dad, I didn't know it would go this far. I turned to her, voice calm. It always goes this far when people build their lives on lies. She nodded slowly, tears welling up. I set my coffee cup down, the last of the steam curling into the sunlight. It's over, Dana, I said. And maybe now you can start again. Outside, a hawk circled lazily over the canyon rim, its shadow drifting across the rocks. Somewhere below, the echo of car doors closing faded into the sound of the wind. The following weeks unfolded like slow justice, quiet, relentless, unstoppable. I didn't need to read the headlines to know what was happening. You could feel it in the silence. People who used to wave when I passed by now looked twice unsure if I was the villain or the man who had finally said enough. By the second week of January, the Phoenix Business Journal ran the first article, Local Investment Family Under Federal Investigation. IRS Confirms Criminal Inquiry. Richard and Patricia Sutton's faces appeared beside a grainy photo of their mansion, its driveway filled with unmarked cars. The article mentioned offshore accounts, falsified tax filings, mail fraud, and possible involvement of extended family members. It didn't mention me. Eli's downfall came next. When his employer, Southwest Capital Advisors, learned about his gambling debts and fake expense reports, they cut him loose. His photo was quietly removed from their website within 24 hours. A few days later, another post appeared online, but this time the headline made me smile. Financial advisor resigns amid investigation into misused funds. That's the thing about truth. It takes longer than gossip to spread, but once it does, it never dies. My life, on the other hand, had returned to something resembling peace. Mornings were slower again. I read the paper on the porch, coffee in hand, while the red cliffs glowed in the rising sun. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking about all the money I'd sent them, the $90,000 that built their illusion of success. And then I'd smile, realizing how perfectly it all balanced out in the end. One night, I walked out to the mailbox and found a letter from the IRS addressed to me. For a moment, I felt a flicker of worry. Then I opened it and read, Mr. Whitaker, thank you for your assistance in an ongoing investigation. Your documentation has been invaluable to our case. No apology, no drama, just recognition. The kind of acknowledgement people like me rarely get while we're alive. By February, the Sutton empire was in ruins. Their mansion sat empty, its gates chained shut. Local news drones filmed boxes being carried out, evidence, or maybe just the remains of a life too heavy with pretense. Eli's Mercedes was repossessed. Richard's consulting firm dissolved quietly, and Patricia's charity board announced her retirement due to personal matters. Dana had stopped posting on social media altogether. The last photo she'd shared was from Christmas Eve, the same night everything shattered. For a long time I wondered what she must have thought, watching her world collapse piece by piece. But wondering doesn't rebuild bridges, honesty does. One afternoon, I drove past their neighborhood. The palm-lined streets were still perfect, the kind of place where nothing ugly was supposed to happen. But as I passed the mansion, I saw something that stopped me cold. The for sale sign was gone. The windows were dark. And on the driveway, a faded chalk outline of tire tracks curved toward the road, the kind left by moving trucks. They were gone. All that remained was a single scrap of ribbon caught in the gate, flapping weakly in the wind. Red frayed like a leftover from some forgotten holiday. That night I sat on my porch with my old Bible. Not because I was religious by ritual, but because faith was how my wife used to anchor me when the world went cruel. I read a verse she had underlined years ago, "Be still and know that I am God." Stillness. That was what I'd been missing all along. The kind of peace that doesn't come from winning, but from letting go. As the sun set, I realized that revenge hadn't brought me joy, truth had. It was cleaner, simpler. It didn't need applause. The next morning, I received a letter by mistake, my name, instead of Dinah's same street. Inside was a foreclosure notice. Her house would be repossessed within 60 days. I set the paper down, staring at the seal. The final domino had fallen exactly as it was designed to. I thought of Dana as a little girl standing beside me on bridge projects, holding my hard hat and pretending she was helping. And I whispered to the empty kitchen, "I warned you about foundations, sweetheart. Even the prettiest structure collapses when the base is hollow." Outside, the February air was crisp, the last snow melting into red earth. It was over. The lies, the manipulation, the power games, all of it had come full circle. Now there was only silence, and somewhere within that silence, the faint sound of something new being born. It was a cold morning in late February when I saw the old sedan pull into my driveway. The tires crunched against the gravel, slow and hesitant, like the car itself wasn't sure it belonged here. Through the window, I recognized it immediately, Dana's, or rather what was left of it. The polished luxury SUV was long gone. This one was scratched, faded, and honest. I waited until she stepped out before opening the door. She stood there in a simple gray coat, no designer labels, no diamonds, no facade. Her hair was tied back loosely, her eyes red but calm. "Hi, Dad." Just 2 words, soft, careful, as if she were afraid they might break something. "Dana," I said quietly, "you found your way back. I didn't think you'd answer. I wasn't sure I would." I admitted, stepping aside. "But you look cold. Come in." The warmth of the house wrapped around her as she crossed the threshold. I poured coffee, real coffee, not the imported kind she used to brag about, and set the cup in front of her. She held it with both hands, staring into the steam like it might tell her what to say. "I got your foreclosure notice," I said, finally sliding the envelope across the table. "Wrong address, right story." Her voice cracked. "I know. The house, it's gone. Eli's gone too. He took what was left of our savings and disappeared. Mom and Dad Sutton are." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Never mind. You already know." I nodded. The truth tends to travel faster than apologies. She flinched, but didn't look away. "You have every right to hate me." "I don't hate you," I said. "But I learned to stop paying for my own disrespect." Her eyes filled. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to hear me say I'm sorry. I was blind. I thought I was protecting my family. I didn't realize I was destroying the only one that actually loved me." The words hung between us like a fragile bridge, swaying but still standing. I looked at her, really looked at her. Gone was the polished confidence, the brittle arrogance. What sat before me now was my daughter, the same woman who used to run barefoot through my job sites, who once believed I could fix anything. And maybe, just maybe, she was right. I never wanted revenge, I said softly. I wanted respect. But respect can't be bought, Dana. It has to be earned one honest choice at a time. She nodded, tears spilling freely now. I want to earn it. I filed for divorce. I'm selling what's left of the furniture, paying off what I can. I don't know where I'll live next month. I stood, walked to the drawer near the kitchen window, and pulled out my checkbook. "Dad," she whispered, "please don't." I wrote carefully, the pen gliding across the paper. $500. The number that had once chained me now felt lighter, not as charity, but as a test. "This," I said, sliding it toward her, "is not a gift. It's a partnership. You use it wisely, rebuild with honesty, and promise me one thing: never let dependence replace dignity again." She looked at the check, then at me. "I promise." "Good," I said. "Then you've already started." She reached across the table and took my hand, small, trembling, but firm. For the first time in years, I didn't pull away. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle, alive. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows. Somewhere a bird began to sing, hesitant at first, then stronger. Maybe that's what forgiveness sounds like, not a grand speech, but a quiet note of something beginning again. I refilled our cups, letting the warmth seep back into the room. "Dad," she said softly. "Yes, I don't deserve your kindness." "Maybe not," I said. "But kindness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing who you want to be when the storm passes." She nodded, eyes glistening, and for the first time since that Thanksgiving night, I saw a spark of the little girl who used to call me her hero. Dana stayed that morning until the sun had climbed over the red cliffs. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Sometimes silence repairs more than words ever can. When she finally left, she hugged me like she meant it. No perfume, no posing, just the quiet tremble of a daughter who had learned what truth costs and what love feels like when it isn't for sale. The sound of her car faded down the hill, swallowed by the hum of the desert wind. For the first time in years, my house didn't feel empty. It felt clean. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and stared at the checkbook still open in front of me. For years, that small rectangle of paper had been a leash connecting me to people who saw me as a wallet with a pulse. Now it was something else, entirely a tool of choice. I'd given Dana $500, not because she deserved it, but because she'd finally understood the lesson that took me a lifetime to learn. Help without respect is slavery, but help built on honesty is freedom. I went to my office, where the folders from the investigation still sat stacked neatly in a drawer. I didn't need them anymore. The law had done its job, the truth had done the rest. I took one last look at those pages, all those numbers, dates, signatures, then fed them slowly through the shredder. Each sheet disappeared with a mechanical hiss, like the sound of a past being erased on purpose. When the last one was gone, I exhaled and whispered to the empty room, "Justice doesn't always need an audience." Outside, Sedona was waking up, sunlight spilling across the cliffs. hawks carving circles through the sky. I stepped onto the porch, wrapped my old flannel around my shoulders, and felt the air sharp and clean in my lungs. A delivery truck rumbled past on the road, and for a moment I thought about how small my world had become, one house, one town, one man quietly rebuilding his peace. And yet it felt enormous. Because freedom isn't about distance. It's about weight, how much you no longer carry. That evening, Dana called. Her voice was steadier this time. "Dad, I signed the lease. It's just a small apartment near downtown Phoenix. Nothing fancy, but it's mine." I smiled into the receiver. "Good. Foundations first, walls later. You remember?" She laughed softly, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard since she was a teenager, helping me mix cement in the backyard. "I do," she said, "and this time I'm building it right." After we hung up, I sat for a long while staring at the photo of my wife on the mantel. The light from the setting sun caught her smile in the glass. "You'd be proud," I said quietly. "She's finally standing on her own." When night came, I lit the fireplace and made a simple dinner: soup and bread, the same meal my wife used to cook on quiet winter nights. I ate slowly, thinking about the bridges I'd built, not the concrete ones, but the human ones, fragile, flawed, but somehow still standing after everything. On the table lay the old Bible she'd left me, the one that had guided me through this storm. I opened it to the verse she'd underlined decades ago, the one that had carried me through every act of patience, every silent retaliation, every moment I wanted to give up. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I ran my thumb over the words, their edges soft from use. Faith. That's what this had been all along, not faith in others, but faith in myself. The belief that even after betrayal, loss, and humiliation, a man could still start again without bitterness. When I stepped outside, the desert night was cool and quiet. The stars above Sedona stretched like an infinite promise, silver against the dark. The wind moved through the junipers, carrying a faint scent of rain. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. For truth, for peace, and for one more chance to build something honest." Then I smiled, not the smile of victory, but the smile of release. Because real victory isn't about seeing others fall. It's about standing steady after they do. Weeks later, I received a small envelope in the mail. Inside was a photo: Dana standing outside her modest apartment, holding a toolbox and smiling. On the back, she'd written in blue ink, "Building my foundation. Just like you taught me." I set the photo on my desk, right beside my wife's picture. 2 generations of women I'd loved, one gone, one learning, both reminding me that love doesn't end when disappointment begins. It just changes shape from giving endlessly to giving wisely. And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. I was understood. The fire crackled behind me, the air smelled of cedar, and the night outside felt endless and kind. I raised my coffee cup to the silence and said, "To truth, to faith, and to new beginnings." Then I laughed softly, the sound of an old man who'd finally made peace with everything that once broke him. "Faith isn't about avoiding storms," I whispered. "It's about knowing who walks with you through them." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Brian Stories for more true-to-life tales of justice, family, and redemption. Share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and tell us, have you ever rebuilt your peace after losing it? Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the quietest victories are the loudest lessons.